I was a community development specialist, and a lot of what I really focused on was working with nonprofit organizations, with board training, and so this is something that is near and dear to my heart. Obviously, extension councils are near and dear to my heart, but this whole concept of making sure that the people who serve in those positions have the skills and the resources and the training that they need to be effective. And so this is what we're going to be talking about for the next 40, 50 minutes this morning, is how to make our extension councils effective, and then what your role as an individual is to create that effective council. So one of the first things that we need to remember is we always have to operate, any organization has to operate within the boundaries of whether it's its articles of incorporation, in our case it's our state statutes, but you have to be aware of what the law says about how you should operate and what your mission should be. We want you to understand the areas of responsibility for the council as a whole and for you as an individual. And we want to look at what makes an effective council, what makes some of our councils much more effective than others, and look at some of those characteristics and help you think about what your council is like. So as we go through this whole presentation, I want you to be thinking back to the county council that you have served or have served on, and reflect on whether or not they are, reaching this goal of being effective. We also want to make sure that we are creating a positive culture within our councils that's welcoming, that brings new voices, and that is representative of the counties that we serve. And looking at individual members. What makes you can't have a good council if the individual members who serve on that council are not doing their part. So we're going to look at the individual role, and then at the end I have some strategies to help you think about how you can become a more effective member of your extension council. So we're going to start with the broad picture, looking at the councils as a whole, and then we'll focus down more closely onto the individual role. But what does make an effective council? First of all, as I mentioned earlier, you have to operate within the state statutes. If you don't, you can get in trouble. And that's just as simple as it is. They are created by state law, so unlike some other organizations, you didn't write articles of incorporation. It was state law that identifies how you're organized and the mission and the purpose of your organization. And it does, the state law does provide those regulations for you. And councils are compelled to follow these laws. Now, sometimes councils choose not to. But we want you to understand that when you choose not to follow state law, you are putting yourself and your organization at risk. So just keep in mind that it's not just good to know those state laws, it's important and necessary that you know what they are and that you follow them. So the state law sets up councils to have 3 primary responsibilities, and we're going to talk about each of these in more detail. The first one is program input, because really the rubber meets the road with extension when we're out doing programs, and so we're looking to councils to help us identify what the needs are in the community and how we can best serve through our programs. Governance is the second one, and we're actually going to focus on that a little bit more in depth, because I often see that's where groups, not necessarily extension councils, but boards, tend to get in trouble because they don't pay close enough attention to the governance of the organization. And then finally, the third responsibility is membership. And you are responsible for recruiting and maintaining your own membership, and we'll look at that one as well. So let's start by thinking about program input and what the role of the council is. Oh, and let me just mention, I saw someone looking at the handout. I intended to mention that at the beginning. In your packet, if you look on the right-hand side, about 3 or 4 handouts back, there's one that says Effective County Extension Councils. And then there is another piece that we're going to look at later that goes along with that, and it's a council self-assessment. So basically, most of the materials that I'm going to be talking about are in your handout, so you don't necessarily need to take a lot of notes, but if you want to, you can follow along with that. So program input, that's the first responsibility that we want to look at. We do ask that council members are in touch with the community and help us to think about what the program needs are. So the council hopefully is out getting information, being aware of what's going on in their community, and gathers that information and brings it to the council as we're making decisions about what are the important trends, what are the things that are happening that we might need to develop programming around. We also hope that you're open to new ideas. Times change, people change, and the issues change. And if we just keep doing the same thing we've always done, we're not going to be very effective. So look for new ideas and new opportunities, whether it's to partner or to bring in new subject matters, but to make sure that you're willing to think about things in a different way. Obviously, setting priorities is an important part of what the council does because we have limited resources, and they seem to get more limited as time goes on. So we have to be very targeted in what we offer in terms of programming to make sure that what we're offering is going to create the best impact and meet those highest needs for the people in our communities. So helping us set priorities and then recognizing what does a quality program look like. Knowing enough about going out and observing programs to know when we as faculty are doing a good job and delivering the kind of information that people need. And also understanding that impact. So when Dr. Stewart earlier this morning was talking about that $945 million impact, it's not just about educating people, it's about the difference that it makes in their lives. And some of that can be couched in terms of money, but some of it is also in terms of their own health, family wellness. There are lots of different ways that you can look at that impact, but in order to know whether or not we're doing a good job, we have to look at, do the programs that we are offering make a difference? And so as a council member, we hope that you are able to recognize that difference that our programs make and help us to communicate that as well. So, and it's not just the impact on the person who shows up to the program. Obviously, if someone comes to a program on dining with diabetes, we hope that they are going to change their eating habits, they're going to be healthier, and that makes an impact on them, right? But it also makes an impact on their family, and it makes an impact on all of us if they are able to improve their health, they're not using as many resources to pay for medical bills, they're not using hospital space when they get sick. It helps all of us. So that's public value that our programs have beyond the value that it has to the individual that shows up to participate in our programs. And then we also hope that you'll be a resource to the community, that when we offer programs that you are aware of them and that you share that information. So if we are doing a dining with diabetes class and you have a neighbor or a friend who is struggling with that you take that information back to them and say, this is a resource for you. You may want to check this out, so that you share that information with the folks that you come in contact with on a regular basis. So those are some of the things we're hoping that councils are doing and being effective in the program input. And then governance, as I said, I want to talk about this one a little more in detail. First of all, I've already said it twice, but I'll say it again, and I'll probably repeat myself again before we get through today, but you must operate within the state law that set up the extension councils. We also hope that you're following the university policy. Sometimes I think councils feel like the university is trying to tell them what to do, and that is really not the case. We are trying to help you, go back to that first thing, follow state statutes, because part of the university's responsibility is to help inform you so that you don't get in trouble. And when they make recommendations on term limits or other kinds of things that maybe you have questions about, they're going to give you the best legal advice they can to help you stay out of trouble, make sure that you're staying within the state statute and the intention of the law. You also need to operate within your own scope of authority. The law allows you and requires you to do certain things, but there are other things that you don't have the authority to do. For example, when faculty are placed in a county, the council is usually part of that process. They are given an opportunity to maybe approve or say, yes, we would love to have this person in our county, or no, we don't feel this is a good fit for our county, but you don't actually hire that specialist. That specialist is an employee of the University of Missouri, so you can't fire a specialist. You may have the opportunity to express concerns and negotiate to make changes, but that would be operating beyond your scope of authority to think that you had the power to hire and fire the regional specialist. Another important part of governance is understanding that you are under obligation to fulfill the Sunshine Law. Because you receive tax funds, You are required to post public notices of your meetings, to provide records of your meetings if they should be requested. And a little bug I'll put in your ear is if your council does not have a sunshine law policy, you might want to think about doing that. And that simply spells out, if we get a request for records, this is what we're going to charge for copies, this is how many days we're going to say we'll make sure we have those copies available. It just helps keep you out of trouble again as far as meeting those requirements of the Sunshine Law. And we do have on our website a sample Sunshine Law policy. If you're interested, I'll be glad to help connect you with that resource. But just make sure that you understand that there's a responsibility of the council to go along with the rules of the Sunshine Law. Also, you're obligated to follow the Title IX regulations, which make sure you aren't discriminating on the basis of gender. And it's encouraged that you think about having bylaws. How many of you here have bylaws for your county council? Good, so almost all of you. Because even though the state law sets up the parameters, there are certain things it doesn't specify. One of the things I pointed out is it doesn't say anything about a quorum. Have you ever if you've read the state law, you'll realize it doesn't tell you what a quorum is for the council, or that you have to have a quorum. And that's something that your bylaws could help define, because without a quorum, you could have 2 or 3 people show up at a meeting and make decisions for the whole group if there's no regulation that says we must have, and normally that's like 1/2. So if you have 12 council members, 6 is half, 1 more is 7, so you'd have to have 7 people in the room to make decisions. Okay, we're going to keep on talking about governance because, as I said, there's lots of information here. Another important part of governance is making sure that your council is organized in such a way that it's doing something, that you're organized for action. And so that means holding regular meetings, making sure that you have meetings scheduled frequently enough that you can make decisions in a timely way, and you don't have to wait months before you get people together to work on an action item. Make sure that you have the committee structure in place. And this is where I find, and I'm talking now about some of the nonprofit organizations I worked with in the past, but often a lot of the work lands on the heads of a few people. And I don't know if any of your councils are like that. I'm not trying to suggest that they are. But often there's few people that are doing the yeoman's work of getting the work done, right? But a good, effective committee structure can help spread that out. So it's not just the executive committee, it's not the officers, but you've got people in place who are taking on specific tasks and getting things done. And so by having a good committee structure, making sure people are on those committees who are going to be effective, and then also making them accountable. It's easy to let things slide, but when you do let things slide and don't hold people accountable for following through on the things that they are responsible for, it just lets that kind of continue. So accountability is an important part of that as well. And then another part of organizing is planning for the future. It's not just about paying our bills this month, but what are some of the issues that are coming up in the future? How are we going to make sure that our funding is going to continue in the future, or maybe it's your facility? Whatever the issues or concerns are of your county council, looking down the road and thinking ahead so things don't hit you upside the head because you weren't paying attention. The next one is providing responsible leadership. And I know we all have officers on our council, but making sure that those officers and those committee chairs are truly giving direction, providing leadership, and serving as role models really for the rest of the council. Later on, we're going to talk about succession planning. And really, the officers can help set the tone for the next people that are coming up the pike as you bring on new council members and they see how the council operates. That sort of sets an expectation to those new members of how things work. And so making sure that that leadership is fulfilling their responsibilities is important. And then the next one, this may seem sort of a no-brainer, but making sure you have a decision-making process in place. Now, in most of your council meetings, I'm assuming that you're going to use Robert's Rules of Order, where you have motions and seconds, and that's appropriate for council meetings. Sometimes that gets a little cumbersome when you try to do that, especially in committee meetings when you've got smaller groups. And so maybe you want to agree as a committee, we're going to operate on consensus. And so here's the parameters of that. consensus, and I could do a whole session on consensus, and I won't bore you with that today, but just thinking about that as an alternate way to make decisions, but knowing up front that that's how you're going to operate within that group, so that when it comes time to make a decision, it's really clear. Yes, we're going to operate by consensus. We don't need emotion, so people can't come back later and say, well, don't think that was valid because we didn't have a motion, we didn't have a second. If you've agreed as a committee, I'm not suggesting this for your whole council, but as in committee meetings, you may want to think about using consensus as a decision-making process. Okay, one of the most important things, in my opinion, and one of the things I hammer on most when I'm doing board training is this issue of financial oversight. This is something you can't delegate away. You can't just send it, expect, the county program director, the county bookkeeper, they're taking care of that. This is one of the most important responsibilities Extension Council members have. And so pay attention to those financial reports. If you have questions about those financial reports, ask them. Ask them in the council meeting, because if you've got a question, I'm sure somebody else also has a question about that, and your council should be able to provide you with the documentation you need. And that's not to say that they can answer every question. I've been caught a couple times when a question was asked and it was like, especially when you're in a meeting and everybody's looking at you for that answer, like right now. Sometimes I need a few minutes to go back and do my research and figure it out. But you should be able to get answers to those questions. So pay close attention to those financial reports and make sure that you understand them. And then it's also your legal responsibility to make sure that you maintain those appropriate records. I talked earlier about Sunshine Law. One of the obligations of the Sunshine Law is if someone comes to you and says, we want copies of your minutes from your Extension Council meetings for the last 12 months, you have to provide those. Well, you can't provide them if you haven't been keeping them. So it's important legally, it's good policy for just operational reasons, but it's also important legally that you're maintaining those appropriate records. And then we do hope that in the meetings, as you are making decisions, that you are creating this environment of civility, that you're willing to listen to new ideas, that everyone has the opportunity to voice their opinions and make their ideas known, and that you're welcoming new voices, because one of your obligations is to represent the people of your county. And you can't do that if everybody on the council comes from the same interests, the same community, the same economic level. But in order for people to feel welcome, you've got to welcome them. You can't just expect someone to show up at a meeting and feel like it's okay for them to disagree or voice concerns. You have to make sure that that environment is there, that can happen. And then I would suggest that every once in a while you need to think about how well are you doing. And that's why I provided this handout, this council self-assessment. We're not going to go through it today. I just am giving it to you as a tool that you can take back to your council and either use it as a council or just as an individual, thinking about the council that you serve on. And it might help you identify some things that you're doing extremely well. It may also help you identify some things that you might need to work on. So occasionally doing that, some sort of a self-assessment. The annual report is another way to evaluate the effectiveness. Every council has to provide an annual report, and that summarizes all of the programs that you've done over the past year, as well as your financial status. So that's a great benchmark to take a look at and make sure that you are doing what you set out to do in providing programs and serving the people in your community. Another way to evaluate your effectiveness is how well are you doing in advocating for financial support. And Dr. Stewart talked about that at all levels of the organization, but that's another benchmark that you could use to measure your effectiveness. And as well as, I've already hammered on fiduciary responsibility, making sure that you are paying attention to the money. And a tool that you might use, and it is available, is an exit survey. So as people are going off the council, talk to them, find out from them what they thought went well, what were their concerns, would they run again if they had the opportunity? If so, why? If not, why not? And that might help you understand a little bit more about the dynamics of your council and, again, what you're doing really well and maybe some things that you could improve upon. So that's governance. And then we move on to membership. Again, this is your responsibility as a council to promulgate the membership of the council. So as with everything, I told you, I just keep saying this, you have to follow state statutes. There are laws that are set up about how you conduct your elections, when they're conducted, and so forth. So you have to make sure you're aware of those laws and that you're following them. But also part of that membership, and this is sort of what I was alluding to earlier, is creating that environment where people feel like they want to be a member. Because if it's a disagreeable experience, and I've known groups in my community, I'm not saying it was my extension council, but I've known groups that had a reputation for being contentious, and who wants to serve on a group that people in the community know they argue, they fight, they don't get along, nobody wants that. And so you want to make sure you have an environment in your council that people think, yes, that's a productive group, I see them doing good things, and they want to, when you contact them and ask them to serve, they're excited about it and willing to say yes. And so that positive environment includes things like making sure you have active participation. It's not just 2 or 3 people that are running the show or voicing the decisions. And sometimes that's up to the council chair to say, Andy, you haven't talked today about your concerns about this. What are your thoughts? And so pulling out voices that are not heard and making sure that voices have opportunity to speak. And then working as a team on things and reflecting the diversity of the community. And we have at the university demographic data on every county, so if you are not sure what your county makeup is, we can get you that information, but just to make sure that, again, all the people in your county are represented on that extension council. And then one of the things I see groups do, not enough, that's what I'm trying to say, not enough, is celebrating their accomplishments. So often, we are so busy going from one meeting to the next, we get this project done, and then we just move on and start in on the next one. I think it's important to celebrate when you do have accomplishments. If you get a raise from the commission, celebrate that. Have some way of recognizing the hard work that you've done to make that happen. And that doesn't mean you have to throw a lavish party. You can just do some little thing at your council. One of the things I used to do when I had an event that I would always get council members to volunteer for, the next council meeting, they all got a payday bar. That was their pay for showing up on that Saturday and helping me with that event. And it's a little thing, but it just lets people know that you appreciate the effort and that you're celebrating the successes that they've had. And that kind of ties right in there with the recognizing service as well. And recognizing the service of council members who are going off, that have turned out and have given 2 or 4 years to your council, making sure that you honor them. And maybe in something a little more meaningful than just announcing their name at the annual dinner, but some way to make them feel that you appreciate the time and effort that they put in. So I've been talking about kind of just the bare bones of what councils ought to be doing, but some councils really kind of stand out above and beyond those. So I want to talk just a little bit about what makes the difference between a good council and a great council. And here's some ideas. One is that they're advocating for extension. And Marshall talked about that, and HC was talking about new opportunities to be advocates. But it's not just showing up at the council meetings and making decisions and going home, but being engaged in advocating for extension beyond those council meetings. They're also in touch with the community. They know what's going on in their community. They pay attention to the issues and the concerns, and they bring those to the council and say, I'm hearing a lot about bullying in the schools. What are we doing? Is there something more we could do to provide training through 4-H or other programs to address this issue? But paying attention to what's going on in your community and bringing those ideas to your council meetings. And promoting extension. Not only bringing the community's concerns to us, but taking the resources that we have and sharing them out with the community so that they know that we can be a resource to them, that these programs are available, and hopefully encouraging people to participate and take advantage of those. And then serving as a resource to the people in your community as well. So those are some of the things that I said we're going to start kind of broadly talking about the council as a whole, but the councils are made up of individuals. So I want to kind of narrow down and look at what, as a specific individual who serves on a council, what would be some ways that you could translate these concepts. So effective council members are informed, and we're going to look at each of these more closely. They are engaged, they're loyal to the organization, and they're innovative. So let's look at what these mean. First of all, informed. As an individual council member, that you need to understand the vision and the mission of the organization. It's hard to serve an organization if you don't know who we are and what we do. So it's important that you, hopefully your councils provide an orientation when new members come on, or that you participate in training like we're doing right now that helps you help you understand what the mission of the organization is, what our vision is, that you are informed about what's going on in your community. And so maybe that's reading the paper and more than just listening to the gossip at the coffee shop, but paying attention to maybe some of the deeper issues that are going on. And also you have to know about extension programs and resources. It's hard to be that link between the community and extension if you don't know about the programs. And in my experience, folks will come to the Extension Council because they're familiar with one piece of what we do. Maybe you're a master gardener, or maybe you're a 4-H volunteer. And so you come knowing that. But it's your obligation to really start to understand the whole organization, not just 4-H. But what does it mean? What is community development? What could that do for your community? What are the resources there? What is the master gardener? And what are the horticulture programs that might help your neighbors? So by paying attention and reading those program reports and the annual report, helping yourself be more informed so that you can be that advocate. So being informed is an important part of being an effective council member. Being engaged, and that means participating, not just showing up at meetings, but making sure that you're enthusiastic about the programs as you're sharing information, that you are passionate about the work that we do. Those of us I've given, more years than I care to admit, I've given to Extension. And I only did that because I believe in what we're doing. And hopefully you believe in what we're doing as well. And you share that passion for the mission of who we are and what we do, the folks around you. That you're willing to represent constituents, not just the ones that are like you, not just the folks that are your neighbors and your friends, but the other folks in your community who may not have a voice at the table, that you are willing to speak up and share the concerns that they might have. We hope that you're open-minded, that you are willing to look for new opportunities and look at things from a different perspective, because we all have a tendency to talk with folks who think like us, don't we? When you go to the coffee shop, you're at church, you tend to talk with people who think the way you think, and that only reinforces our way of thinking. We need to be willing to listen to other points of view and see things from a different perspective. And then independent thinking, this I think is incredibly important. It's easy when you're in a group to just go along with what other people are saying or doing. It takes a little more guts to say, wait a minute, I don't know that I can agree with that. I think that we might need to look at this a different way. And so the willingness to be that independent voice and to say if you have concerns. Because again, it's kind of like the questions I was talking about earlier. If you have concerns, there's probably other people who have concerns but may not feel brave enough to step forward and speak out. So be willing to be that independent thinker. We hope that our council members are loyal, that they are committed to the mission that we talked about, that you do believe it's important and you're willing to support it, and that you are willing to fulfill your responsibilities. And I'm preaching to the choir here. You guys gave up a Saturday to come here to hear about your Extension Council, but I know that you have people back in your county councils who are perhaps not, I shouldn't say no, I shouldn't say definitely, but I'm guessing there might be some folks back there who are not fulfilling their responsibilities. We need folks who are willing to do what they have agreed to do by serving on the council. And then innovative. We've talked a little bit about looking for new opportunities and looking for solutions. I've been in way too many meetings where people are more than happy to gripe about things or to express concerns, and we can go down that rabbit hole. We can spend a whole lot of time and energy with the things that are wrong or the things that we don't like. It takes a lot of energy and effort to look at those things and say, okay, what are the solutions? How can we turn this around? What's an opportunity to make this better? And be willing to try new things and take risks. And be willing to accept failure when you do try those new things, because not every new idea that your council might have is going to be a great one, right? Some of them are going to be great. I've known of communities that have these like town and country dinners or city, county. I mean, they have, and some counties have tried that and it hasn't been successful. That doesn't mean it wasn't a great idea. We need to, when we try things that don't work out, we need to try to learn from them and figure, okay, well, wonder why that didn't work? Because I'm sure you've heard this. Have you ever been in a meeting and somebody says, well, let's do this, and everybody, what do they say? Try that 10 years ago. It didn't work. It's not going to work now. Well, maybe if you did a little homework, you could find out why it didn't work 10 years ago and figure out a way to make it work now. So we do hope that you will be willing to try new things and take those risks. So I want you to think about, if this is sort of the gold standard for effective councils, think about your own role and what you're playing on your council. How do you fit into being informed, engaged, loyal, and innovative? And if you think maybe you have some places where you're really strong, that's great. And hopefully you will share some of that strength with other new council members as they come on. But maybe you have some things where you think, maybe I could do a little bit better at this. So the last part I want to talk about are some steps that you might be able to take in the areas where you feel like you could grow and become a better council member. So here's some steps that you might want to consider. First of all, knowing your responsibilities. And being here today, again, preaching to the choir because you guys have shown up. But important first step is understanding the extension organization, the council, the laws of government, and what your responsibilities are as a council as a whole and as a member of that council. So begin by just understanding those responsibilities. Prepare for meetings. This is one of my pet peeves, is when people come to a meeting and the minutes have been sent out, a week ahead of time, and then they want to take 10 minutes so everybody can read through the minutes. That's something that should have happened before you walked in the door, right? If you're going to be a good council member, you're going to prepare for the meeting, you're going to read the minutes, you're going to look at the agenda so that you know what's going to be discussed. So when you come to the meeting, if you have concerns about this new policy with the Fair Board, you can talk about it intelligently because you knew it was going to be on the agenda. You talked to a few people and said, well, what's going on with the Fair Board? What's the story behind this? So being prepared for the meetings is an important part of your responsibility as an individual council member. Participate in the meetings. I talked about this earlier. Be the voice that speaks up and says, wait a minute, I don't quite understand that. One of the things, and I'm going to come to this again later, but one of the things that you need to understand is your opportunity to disagree with the council is during the council meeting. Once the council makes a decision and you walk out the door, you need to support the decision. So it's critically important. If you have concerns, you need to speak up and say them while the council meeting is going on. Don't wait later and grumble about it, especially if you didn't say anything during the meeting. That's your chance to voice your concerns so that when the group makes a decision, they make an intelligent decision that has looked at all perspectives before they moved on. So make sure that you're an active participant in your council meetings. And connect to the community. I've said it several times. You represent the people in your county. It's hard to do that if you don't know what's going on in their lives. So take the time to get out and talk to folks and find out what things are concerns of theirs. Learn about extension programs. Again, I talked about, you maybe come from 4-H, but when you get on that council, you represent all of the programs that are available through extension. So find out about them. Read those reports, read the annual report, and learn about the programs that they have available in your community. Tell other people about extension. You've probably all heard we're, best kept secret. Nobody likes to hear that, right? Because we don't think so. We know about us, but the only way we're not going to be a best kept secret is if we get out there and tell people about the resources that we have in extension. Get to know the faculty and staff that serve your county. Most of us, most council members are pretty familiar with the people that are headquartered in their office, but you have a lot more people that are doing programs in your county. So take a chance to go sit in on a class that Jim's teaching, if Jim's not in your county and you don't know who he is, but find out he's offering a class in your county, go sit in on it and get to know him and find out more about what he does. Because once you have that relationship, it's a whole lot easier to promote the programs because you know not just the program, but the person and what they do. Be an advocate for extension. I've said that a lot, but obviously it's very important to us that you serve in that role. And I've talked about this 1 minute ago. Support those council decisions. Your chance to disagree is during the meeting. And unfortunately, I have seen the dark side of this. I have seen groups that walk away disgruntled with a decision that was made and then go around griping to everybody. And that doesn't do anybody any good. That undermines the council. It makes people second guess what's going on over there. So it is your obligation as a council member, once the council makes a decision, even if you voted against it, when you walk out of that room, you should support those decisions. And then the last one, avoid conflicts of interest. And that's really hard to do on Extension Council because almost everybody comes there with a vested interest in the programs. Maybe you have kids in 4-H, so it's not appropriate for you to set up policies that are going to benefit personally you or your immediate family members. The example I usually give of this, my son-in-law has a lawn care business. Well, if our council owns our building and I was on the council, it would not be appropriate for me to say, oh, wait a minute, Mifflin Lawn Care, they're the best, let's make sure we hire them. In fact, you need to step away from the conversation and the decision. So be aware when you have that conflict of interest and make sure that you are stepping away and being a responsible council member and avoiding that. So I think my time is just about up. Maybe time for 1 or 2 questions. Does anybody have? Yes. Did I open a can of worms, Vern?
In a small way.
Okay.
Yes. You pointed out the state statute and what about going the other way from the university down? There is, in the state statute, it does state that, the council advises and guides on hiring. But the university is also supposed to, when it's on the bad side, when there's going to be cuts, supposed to come to the council first and advise them and get the council's opinion. That hasn't been happening in the last few years.
That's above my pay grade. But I understand, it does go both ways. The councils are obligated to follow the state law. The university is as well. And so if you feel like that's not happening, that's where we need to have conversations. So obviously that I do not work in that realm. That's not something I do, but I understand your concerns, and it's valid. We should, it works equally on both sides.
So there has been some state law since on staffing, but this was passed in '62, so it's sort of fuzzy, but still, I think it should have been done, or should be done. And it hasn't been done.
You serve on the state council, so you have an opportunity to.
I have, but I have been nicely shut down on that.
Any other questions, and particularly about your county council, because that's really what we're focusing on today. Yes.
One thing that I have been so impressed and pleased with within
I think they want you to use the mic. Sorry.
Oh, yes. One thing within our local council, we have had active participation from commissioner members. The commissioners appoint a member of that council, of their group to come, and the dedicated attendance and the role that the commissioners have played within. They assist with bringing county equipment to help us clean up, to maintain our building. They're effective in being able to from the decision situation. And then when we make our presentations for the additional funds or the maintenance of that, they already know. And it's just been, it's been wonderful to see that, that cooperative situation. And I think that's been a key for us. But, they have met us and we have met them.
Right.
And it's just been really, really a wonderful part of it.
That is great. Thanks for sharing that. And if you do have that good partnership with your your commissioners, that is amazing. The last thing I want to say is this presentation is actually available to all of you to use for your councils. And I am in the process of updating all of the council training modules, and this is one of them. It has a complete script. The handouts that you have are in the process of going through publications, and once they've done the final edits, this is just like my draft version, so once they're edited, hopefully by this fall, this and several other modules will be available for you to train your county councils on their job and their responsibilities.